it's such a heavy conversation. Sometimes I feel like I wish we have more fun or more laughter in part of the conversations, but
Sure.
it is the nature of the conversation though that this is not an easy topic. It kind of hits people in an uncomfortable space, but that's our hope is to kind of, I call it disrupt people's day in a good way. Like kind of got to get disrupted a little bit to hopefully make some tangible, palpable progress. So.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders tend to shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have conversations with real people, with real stories. And today I have Hugh Breland. He's the CEO of U&I, an organization that focuses on purpose, inclusion, and empowerment for people with disabilities. Their mission is to spread the light of inclusion for those with disabilities and eliminate barriers for them. And they do this through job placement, job training, life skills training, advocacy, and many other things to ensure that people with disabilities maximize their purpose and are empowered and included. I love that mission. So welcome to the show, Hugh. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. And, I have so many places I want to start, but I know for sure that the most important place for me to hear from you and for everyone to hear from you is definitely your kind of before we get into all the things you do now, I kind of want to hear a little bit about where you come from, kind of about your wherever you choose to start, but where's the story that kind of led you to this path?
Yeah. So I would say basketball was at the center of my story as a young person. And that plus then community work and even religious work. Okay. And so I noticed as a young kid, a good friend of mine named Chauncey that I played with, he could jump out of the gym. Don't get it twisted. I couldn't. But he was one of my great friends. I would take him to certain parts of my world and notice that he was not included, that he was not even thought of as like, oh, this guy might show up. And then once he was there, he was made to feel a certain way. That is excluded. Like it's harder for you to be here because you're not a part of the clique or a part of the crew or whatever. And so it deterred me from inviting him to certain things. And then fast forward throughout my life, I began to notice that, not just in that context, but in many others, whether that was a friend, again, that looked different or, again, had disabilities or whatever. It just became this major passion of mine to be about inclusion and end exclusion as best as I could where I was at. So that's really part of the major catalyst to my story. Another catalyst is just the reality that I think the reality of so many marginalized communities, which a lot of my friends were in those communities, seeing the opportunities that I was getting and going, okay, my starting line, if we're going to run 100 yards, but I get to start at the 50-yard line and you're back at the 1 yard line, I'm probably going to win, regardless of if I should or not, or if we are equally talented. I'm just at a different starting point. And so I found that I got opportunities that some of my friends didn't get. And that even as I got older, internships, all the whatever it was, scholarships, all the things, I just had more access. So accessibility became, again, a catalyst for me to want to be a part of a community and really what I say, run towards the mess as opposed to live ignorant of the mess or run away from it.
Hmm. What are some of the ways that you ran towards that mess?
So for me specifically, I started serving in um, marginalized communities. I would say it started for me because a guy essentially mentored me every Friday morning from at like 6:30 for 6 straight years of my um, junior high and high school. I valued mentorship. And so I noticed that in marginalized communities, a lot of the kids are in single parent homes and specifically single moms. So not a lot of men and not a lot of, then again, educational opportunities or not even a lot of encouragement towards that at times. And so I just started mentoring kids in marginalized communities, which then connected me to the adults, which then connected me to the entire kind of ecosystem, or you might call it, that marginalized community was swimming in.
Mm.
And I became more and more aware of the needs, and then started just, seeing where I could be helpful. But, you can be very hurtful if you're not careful. So
Yeah.
been doing that my whole life. Yeah.
And I know you've done a lot of work with marginalized groups throughout, but more recently, your focus is really narrowed in with the recent kind of you and I
Mhm.
initiatives around specifically people with disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, you know, of the of the entire 100% of people that could work that have a disability, only 25% of them currently are employed. So you're talking about 75% of the workforce that could work. Now, there are certain people that don't have the ability to do certain jobs, but the workforce that can work, there's a huge population there that is able to work but doesn't have the opportunity. Whereas flip that number, it's really 75 to 80% of people that don't have a disability that are hireable are in fact employed right now.
Hmm.
So, that's a gap that you got to begin to fill the gaps. The other reality is that we have like 11 million jobs right now and like 6 million workers to fill those jobs be in traditional lanes. So if we're not willing to get outside of the traditional lanes and say, hey, what about this group that can do work that has huge value? Why are we not tapping into that? And I would take it a step further. Yes, I'm very focused on people with disabilities. A lot of the are veterans that have been just kind of left to their own devices when they get out, and that's homelessness and all the things that we see a lot with our veteran community, and then people with records in prison. Um, if you have a misdemeanor or a felony, it doesn't matter. The American Bar Association found recently in a study that there are 45,000 barriers to work. 45,000 barriers to work for someone with a criminal record. So we have, I don't know, 17 million that have a felony charge in there right now in the United States. We have another tens of millions with misdemeanor. And you're talking about all these hurdles to get education, jobs, and housing. And then tack on transportation. And you've basically got what the marginalized communities deal with on a regular basis. And um, and so yeah, we tackle that. I mean, that's what we do. We go towards those zip codes and we offer all types of programs. One program, for example, in-house, we can employ people to be a part of the supply chain. So we do fulfillment and we hire people with disabilities to be a part of our staff. And we can house about 200 in-house, that's a great workforce there. And then externally, we help another between with COVID, it kind of shifts us some things, and we didn't have access to certain things. But about 1,000 to 2,000 additional people outside of our facility that we're helping get either education, employment, or like I said, a lot of our veterans are homeless. So we help them take that first step towards transitional living, and then just, keep going. Give them quick education that can get them a job, and then continue to build on that education. And so, yeah, that's a lot of our focus right there.
Wow. And help me, I hear it and I understand it. I believe it. But I'm left wanting to hear more about this 25% of the, what are those, thousands of hurdles? What is going on with the 75% that are not employed? What does that experience look like?
So I will tell you that it starts with the education system as a kid. You're already reinforcing the idea that this segment of the kids of the population are somehow not just different, but different in a negative way. That's the perception is the reality. And the reality is that we're separating from the jump and saying, you're not going to be a part of what quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
And so if that's our mindset from the jump, then once a kid, again, it's like the foster care system. You age out of special needs, or, they call it different things in different cities, different states. But, at 17, 18, not only are you aging out of a system that's already dismissed you, but then when you age out, your parents, many times, what people don't understand is at 18, many times the one parent has to quit their job because perhaps this individual can't do all the necessary things, or just simply needs rides everywhere or whatever. And so when that happens, we actually reinforce the cycle of poverty, because we take these families that many times have multiple kids, we reduce them to one single income, and on top of all that, we put them in categories and label them and say, well, you either A, you're not hireable, you're not really a part of what we can do, or B, if we do hire you, it's going to be for very low paying. Like, we're just going to put you in the category of minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And so we don't think livable wage, we think minimum, and we don't think, we're not in meetings. I mean, how many meetings have you or others that are listening been in where you're genuinely strategically thinking about how to have a part of your workforce be diverse in ability?
Yes.
And how are you thinking about that strategically as a company? And most companies, let's just be frank, are only doing the minimum required if something's required.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, we got to meet a quota, so we're going to do the minimum. That's not, it's why we get into situations where we have 11 million jobs and 6 million employees, because we say, well, there's nobody else out there. I call it the untapped talent pool. You have all this untapped talent, but you're not thinking as strategically about your marketing initiatives and your things, their trinket and how to, make more money. Instead, from a human, we're talking about humanity today. From
Mm-hmm.
a human perspective, if we want to be a more diverse culture, for example, diversity is usually thought of, quite frankly, as black or white, black and white.
Sure.
Like, that's
Sure.
diversity. That's ridiculous. And it's also ridiculous that we have so many millions of people with disabilities in the United States, and we're not even thinking of them when we think diversity or inclusion. It's like diversity and inclusion ends with a black person or a white person. That doesn't make sense. Why would it end there? Yeah, that's part of it. but man, we have a huge segment. And, it's not sexy to talk about or to think about, because let's just be honest. It's, kids with cancer is extremely prevalent, and we want to take care of kids with cancer, no doubt about it. The amount of kids that we have that have disabilities that we're just pushing into a certain segment of society is far greater. We don't pay attention, and hence the cycle. So yeah, that's
Yeah. So to help me understand the problem better, this is my reasoning for my line of questioning, just so I can set the context.
yeah,
You mentioned how, some kids grow out of, adolescence, and, they have this disability, and they're kind of almost everything around them is funneling them towards this part of society, right? Their own families are kind of quitting that second income to take care of them and shelter them from, and then you have businesses themselves that are not considering their own inclusion in this environment. That's, I'll be frank, even with the best intentions of trying to be as inclusive as possible, ableism is not included in that conversation often at all.
right.
So where is, like, what are it's probably multifaceted, but where are we tackling the problem from? Like, I'll just put it very bluntly, and kind of maybe even, forgive me if it's off-putting, but like, is it are we trying to help the people with disabilities get out there and apply for jobs? Or are we looking for corporations to be seeking people with disabilities? Or where's
Yes.
the
So
solution sitting?
right. So if you think just what you said, you could approach it by from the corporate standpoint and say, we've got to change the corporate mindset, so to speak, or perspective of business leaders to think differently about this group. Or you could, like you kind of said, approach it from, let's run towards the group that is being affected and train them up and just kind of make them almost like so desirable that we're going to make it happen.
Right.
Honestly, we approach it both ways. so we're advocating, we're talking to employers kind of consistent basis. We do job fairs, with employers. So we're constantly trying to get more and more employers to be open to the access. And you just take it, one step at a time with employers, and you just start it, just eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, it is a little bit more. Well, you would understand this if you don't have a job, or you don't feel like you have purpose or whatever, you're hungry. So we do run towards the potential employees, and we we train them, we upskill them, we're always thinking about how to be most effective in that segment too. So
Mm-hmm.
we're running both lanes as fast and as hard as we can. But that's the part of the issue with nonprofit space is finance, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you raise this much money, then you can have that much staff and that much, tools, that many tools, and you're kind of limited to what you can produce in, X amount of people. So that's why our reach, I think we could scale and be exponential. But we're currently, 1,200 to 1,500 people per year.
But it makes a difference. That's still great. Still appreciate it. Yes.
I think that the way that we approach, or the way that we talk about it, is to bring it maybe full circle to love as a business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Love is, for us, one of the biggest definitions of love is willingness to go at someone else's pace. Willingness to go at someone else's pace. So a company or a business leader willing to go at the pace that's different than what they're used to, or they're, that's instead of, one of my friends, for example, has a daughter with severe autism. She speaks in a certain language that he understands. Like at home, he totally understands it. They go out into the world and she speaks that same language and he understands it, but the people around him don't. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, we've had this conversation where he's like, so why would we look at other cultures or other groups and say we need to learn their language, but not look at an autistic child or an autistic adult and say we need to learn that language? Because being patient enough to learn that language, to understand that if they're being loud, that may be their language, that we need to not treat them like, oh, we got to quiet them down. I mean, that's kind of the definition of oppress, is to quiet you down. So I have autism, I'm a little loud, or I make a few noises here and there. Why can't you be willing to learn my language? And so, but that's that mentality. And love is at the foundation of what we do. And it ultimately, over and over again, love is what we believe changes the game. You got to keep coming back. And that's why a lot of times when you run towards the margins or run towards the excluded or run towards the mess, that's why we don't see as much change, is because it's hard ass work. And if the grind is real and you do come up against a lot of hurdles. And so if you're not understanding how to keep, sustainable health plan in the midst of serving a lot of unhealthy or unwanted or whatever, it grinds and people kind of give up on it, or they just think, I'm just going to throw money at it to make me feel better.
Sure. So between the two kind of two-pronged approach, I know there's many facets to it, but between, working with upskilling people with disabilities and working with them and giving them opportunities, and also the other aspect of helping, businesses or creating mindsets and awarenesses around understanding the world of having empathy for people with disabilities. I really want to talk to you a little bit more about the latter, specifically because I think when I think of anyone listening to this episode, we work in, most of the audience here is going to be working in some sort of business environment that, has an opportunity to shift something, if not a mindset, if not make an opportunity. So I want to talk about what we can do. I want to talk about what it's like to shift. I'm always about shifting mindsets. I'm hoping that these episodes are always giving somebody an aha moment, a chance to take something they thought they understood and unlearn it and rethink it. And I think this is one of those things. This is one of those things where we can uncover something that we assumed, something that we never considered, and maybe shift that. So, Hugh, where do we start? Where can we go if we want to make a difference or an impact?
So I would tell you the simplest way to start is to find organizations, specifically nonprofit organizations in your community, and go and just start asking questions about their actual needs. Organizations that work with kids with disabilities or adults, or there's all kinds of prison reentry type programs. There's also veteran focused organizations. And here's the thing: if you make time for it, it will ultimately become a part of your DNA. I think you gotta be willing to go in and as the learner and not as the savior. So if I go into an organization and I volunteer, I don't want to think of myself as, oh, I'm the savior here. I'm like the cool guy. I'm the one that has all the abilities, or I have the money, or I have this. It's like, no, go in with humility and say, I'm actually intentionally here to learn more, to to expand and evolve as a human in a better way, right? So, you heard my story. I ran towards mentoring in the marginalized communities. That's a huge one. That's awesome, and it's huge needs in every community. There's also the idea of just there's two more. One, kind of the slow roll approach of just getting once a month, get into an organization, be around it, be in the soup, whatever that looks like. If just make sure you're interacting. So, interacting with people with disabilities, whether it's a kid or an adult. The other thing that I challenge people, I have a daughter, and I think one of the greatest lessons we can teach our kids is lessons of inclusivity and diversity. So, and we tend to learn, unfortunately, it takes this, but like our kids teach us a lot. And the way a kid views a person with a disability is beautiful. It's untainted. It's raw. It's pure. So I would always tell people, if you got kids, or if you got nieces or nephews or cousins, take one of them with you and do it together, because you're modeling. So our society is built on you mirror what's modeled for you. And we can argue that, but I think I'm going to win. So if you're intentionally going to actually change the game, take somebody with you, specifically a younger person, because you're expanding their mind and their perspective. You're going to learn from that person and the person you're hanging out with, or the people. And, it's not going to be easy, but if you're really committed to it, like once a month or something, people want the reward, but they don't want the routine that gets you to that reward. Mm-hmm. And so like, you really have to say, I'm not just going to throw up a bunch of hyperbole around being inclusive. I'm going to go do it and let my actions say, yes, he is, or she is. And then I've got a kid or somebody in my neighborhood around me that's watching it too. And that's how we slowly but surely change the game.
I love that. I love the concept of being a learner and not a savior. I think I'm guilty of seeing charity or things as charity, or things as, these efforts that if I go out of my way, I'm somehow better or above what I'm helping. And that's a powerful reminder. I really appreciate that. Yeah. One, I guess, last arena I want to touch on and pick your brain is for people who are listening in, who are, I'll just frame them as business minded first. Not to say they're bad people, but we're here to talk about business. What are some results or outcomes or success stories you have of successfully, incorporating people with disabilities and breaking through that barrier? What have you seen that'll help us really have a big picture for that mindset?
Right. So business minds, obviously go to the bottom line first. And I would say that you get tax breaks, benefits, and I'm not excited to say that necessarily, but when you're business minded, you do. And then you many times get external support. We send even job coaches to be on site for a certain amount of months or weeks to make sure that you're getting the outcomes that you want from employees that you're hiring that have disabilities or whatever. And then I would just say, it is a conversation that needs to be had in the C-suite, so that it's a real all in. We're all in on this, and we all understand that we're not going to go from where we're at to perfect, getting 100% grades on inclusion and all that. I just think we have to be willing to even be patient with ourselves. But the financial piece it's interesting. You'll find that it's hard for me to prove this, even though I can prove it by statistics about being being at the workplace on time and working the whole time you're there, people with disabilities, by and large, are way more on time, and they work, and you don't worry about them. And it's a very interesting dynamic, but it is one that we can prove statistically, and that if a business leader is listening, you're going to get loyal, hardworking employees, which we all know and you can, if you're willing, you can upskill them. You can help train them, and they'll get better. But they will show up and almost just pester you, like, let's go, let's get this. And it's awesome. Yeah. And then the rest of your staff team actually grows as well, their mindset.
Yeah.
And so there you go.
No, that's beautiful. That last bit is exactly what I was looking for. I mean, it makes perfect sense. They shouldn't be marginalized, but they are. And so when they're seen and accepted, they're gonna stand up for you. They're gonna look out for you and work for you harder, because you've shown them, you've given them a home, right? And I think the exposure of a team to be around and be supportive together and adopt this culture can speak volumes to the morale and kind of the culture that forms around it. So yeah, 100%. That makes a lot of sense. And
yeah. And we're working really hard to, we're starting some virtual reality gamification training for jobs in the meta. And so because what people don't realize is about 40 million, maybe it's even grown to 60 million at this point, of the gaming community in the United States are people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing how many of them are on those types of platforms. And there's a lot of equality in gaming because you're an avatar nobody knows. Mm-hmm. So it's that whole industry in the meta and just tech in and of itself is a great space, again, to be thinking about hiring people with disabilities maybe that need to be in home.
Yeah. Very interesting. Hugh, before we close out here, just give a quick kind of, I understand you operate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, correct?
Yes.
Can you give a little pitch for you and I, just so people know how to reach you, know how to contact you if they want to help out?
Yeah. So youandispreadthelight.com. You can go there. We are at It Takes You and I on the gram and on Facebook. It takes you and I to spread the light of inclusion for people with disabilities. We will grow further and faster if you believe that. If you believe that it does take you and I. And if fundamentally in your heart, there's some kind of palpable, like, I feel this, I feel that the ampersand is at the center of our brand, that these people should be included, and your voice matters, and your talent matters, and your gift matters. If that's what you feel, then partner with us. We're looking to go and grow and scale, not just in the United States, but even internationally. And so that's how you check us out. And then you connect with us, and then we rock from there.
Awesome. Hugh, thank you so much. It's been really, really inspirational and motivational for me to have this talk today. I've got a lot of things in my head, and that's a good thing. So I hope the listeners also have the same. Thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Jeff, and always want to support you guys however we can.
Awesome. And as always, to our audience, thank you. And we hope you enjoyed this talk. We do post new episodes every week. If you have not, please do check out our book, Love as a Business Strategy, available in all sorts of places. So subscribe, rate the podcast, tell a friend, and thank you, Hugh, one more time. And we will see everybody next week.